Is it time to 86 the summer of 84? Hello and welcome to RotD Review of the Day. And today you may notice that things are a little bit different. I got a new angle, I got a new microphone, I got some new equipment, camera mount, and so forth. So I just ask that you bear with me for a couple of videos at the very least while I get this really dialed in and refined and make it the best possible experience I can for you. So in the meantime, what I'd like to do today is talk about the 2018 movie Summer of 84. Now, I'm going to state that I do recommend this movie and I do like it, but I like it in a very interesting way, and here's why. The first 45 minutes that I was watching this, I didn't like it. I didn't want to like it at that point. And there's a few reasons for that. And a lot of it has to come down to stereotypes and the situation that we're winding up in our cultural relevance of 80s throwback stuff right now. It's not rubbing me the wrong way. I think it can really work, but I think it's trying to capture lightning in a bottle, and to some success, some things have done it, like Stranger Things I thought was very good. So for me, this felt like capitalizing on that and going in for the quick cash grab. And if it seems that way to you on first, you kick it off and you're watching the first 5 minutes of it and it's nothing but 80s tropes, all I say is bear with it, and I'll get into why. Just so you're wondering, if you haven't watched a RotD review before, these reviews are spoiler-free and safe. There will be a spoiler-filled deep dive discussion video that will accompany this one, but this is safe. So I think the best way to really go into how I feel about it and why is to go into the categories. And as always, we have 5 different categories, each category worth up to 20 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the first category is plot. Now, again, stereotypes. This opens with a fairly average, misfit, Americana, suburban white teenager that has his ragtag group of friends, and of course it's like paint by numbers going down the checklist. Okay, well, we need the fat one, we need the smart one, let's give him glasses. We need the kind of cool one that's a little bit dangerous, but not extremely, because he still has to be able to hang out with these misfits. It really feels very cliched, and that was one of the reasons I didn't want to like it. But the general plot is that this main character is suspecting his across the street neighbor of being a serial killer that the police are looking for, that is not in their neighborhood, but it's kind of in their surrounding neighborhoods, their surrounding districts, that kind of thing. And something about his across the street neighbor makes him suspect him, and it kind of turns into a little bit of a Rear Window situation, just a little bit. And then, he's trying to find evidence against him, and his friends don't believe him, but then, the friends do believe him, and then his friends don't believe him, and he can't tell his parents, he can't go to the cops because they'll never believe him, and so on. And then it's off and running. Now, I am going to very briefly talk about here, and I'm going to talk about a lot more in the deep dive discussion, the concept of complementary contrasts. And this is where it gets important, and this is why I wound up liking this movie, is you have a lot of tropes in play. You have a lot of cliches and stereotypes in play. And the thing that I thought this movie did brilliantly, without spoiling anything, is the last half of it. Maybe even I'd say, it waits until the last quarter of it, but it throws the stereotypes away, and it becomes very, very disarming. When I talk about complementary contrasts, there's a good example of this. I think it was a 2008 or 9 movie called Mystery Team. It has Donald Glover in it, and it doesn't share a lot of the same elements to it, but it's a good example of what I'm trying to talk about here. In Mystery Team, you have a group of teenagers. They're about 17, 18 years old, but they're playing very, very naive it's three boys and they're playing very, very naive versions of themselves, where they have a mystery detective team that's very Hardy Boys, Encyclopedia Brown-esque, to the point of sitting on their lawn with a cardboard, we will solve crimes for 25 cents and so forth. It's very juvenile, and they're stuck in this juvenile set of, mindset. They'll stub their toe and just, cinnamon sticks. It's very, very sterile like that. And then they get thrust into situations of drug dealing and having to track down, a stripper, and it goes into really, really dark territory, and they never break their character. And so then you have the contrast between this sickly sweet juvenile aspect to their characters and the dark situations that it put them in, and thereby you have the comedy in this dark comedy of Mystery Team. And that's what I mean by complementary contrast. Now, the summer of '84 worked, I thought, on about the same level. Now, it wasn't quite as stereotypical as the Encyclopedia Brown-esque Mystery Team. It skirted that line just a little bit, but for the most part, it played it fairly straight. It just dealt with it felt like lazy tropes, but it mostly just dealt with tropes. You had these characters, they were somewhat believable. But you were, again, kowtowing to stereotypes. And then when it threw them all away, it turned the characters and turned the situations completely on its head. And the first half of the movie that I didn't like, it's not that the second half redeemed it. It's that the second half made me look at the first half differently, changed my perspective on it, and because of those complementary contrasts, made me love it. So that's a really unique thing that I can, that a movie will make me rethink the portions I didn't like in the context of the complementary contrast that it developed, and then make me wind up liking them. So I thought that was pretty brilliant, and I think that when I first thought about making this review, when I first thought about making the scoring of it, I was thinking that it was just happenstance. It was accident. It couldn't have been a purposeful thing. It's too, I hesitate to use the word brilliant, but it was extraordinarily smart. And upon reflection and really thinking about this, I gave this movie several days to simmer in my brain. And where they went with the second half, I think, was so direct and so purposeful and such a stark contrast that I think that it was purposeful. I think that they did develop complementary contrasts on purpose, and I think that the stereotypes of the characters in the first half it was purposeful, and in that regard, I think that it was brilliant. I gave the plot 18 out of 20 points, and I really, really think it was worth it, despite the fact that I didn't like the first half. I thought that was very, very interesting. And the intent, like I said, I kind of struggled with whether or not that was a purposeful thing or not. And I honestly don't know. I mean, not for absolute certain. I've never seen an interview with the director, directors. And I've never looked at any behind the scenes stuff on this movie or, anything of that sort. So I'm making assumptions here, which I kind of have to do with the intent category. I have to kind of put myself in their shoes and what they intend, and I have to take trailers and supplemental material and kind of piece it all together and find out what was going on in their head and how successful they were at it. And I am going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that it was purposeful, that this is how they designed this movie to be. And so for the intent, I give that 18 out of 20 points. Now, the acting was, as you might suspect from me describing this, it was very... the dialogue was very ham-fisted through about 3/4 of it, and the acting was enough to keep things kind of suspenseful as slight showdowns started to happen. But again, complementary contrasts. And by the time the end came and you had the characters in place and doing what they did towards the end, they showed real acting chops. I have to give massive amounts of credit to Rich Sommer, who played the across the street neighbor. Again, not giving any spoilers about whether he was or whether he wasn't, but all I'll say is that his performance was very fun, and then it was very powerful. So, kudos to that. Acting, I thought, was wound up being superb, and I give that 17 out of 20 points. The technical, I'm going to go ahead and say it, I gave 18 out of 20 points. And I thought that the setting of the 80s, I was trying to find anachronisms in it, and every time I thought I found one, I really didn't. As far as them quoting particular movies from the 80s, it fell within the timeline. I looked a few of them up that I was a little squiffy on, and yeah, none of them came out after 84, so it fell into that pretty nicely. There were a few that were kind of gray area-ish for me. Like, growing up in the 80s, I can't remember anybody in my neighborhood using a push manual, non-gas, non-electric, the spinny blade lawnmower. That felt very like out of place there. Like this is was this the 1960s or the 1980s? But at the same time, there's no reason nobody could have used them. So it may have seemed a little out of place, but it still is within the realm of possibility. So the other bits, the camera work, the special effects, there were not that there was a lot of special effects. There was some, blood and gore effects, some body makeup, that kind of thing that worked really well. And, but ultimately how they played to dark and light situations. This is a movie that makes good use of shadows and makes good use of hidden figures, and I thought worked really well on a technical category, level, and I don't really have any complaints on that regard. I thought it did a very admirable job. At the end of the day, it delivered, and even the soundtrack was feeling very much like a Stranger Things ripoff, but I think it came into its own, and I think it was appropriate for the movie, and I think that when it ended well. And the fear quotient, I gave a 15 out of 20 to this, and that is, I would say, entirely due to the end. Well, not entirely, because there were good moments in there where you had characters that, like you do often in cat and mouse games, where they're forced to, I know that you know, I know that you know that I know, but here we are meeting in public and have to put on smiley faces and have normal conversations. Some pretty good suspenseful tension moments like that in this movie. But I think especially the ending was very, very visceral. It was brutal. And it wasn't brutal just in a physical violence sort of way. It was very, very brutal in a getting in your head, getting in the character's head, and mentally and emotionally torturing them. There are worse things than death, and this movie explores that, and I thought it did it really well. So, again, I don't want to go into spoiler territory, but I was very impressed with the suspense, the tension, and then the ultimate delivery of some very haunting imagery and dialogue. So that gives us a total score of 86 for Summer of 84. And I think it's really deserving of it, which I think is really surprising, like I said, considering I spent the first half of it just not really liking it at all. Who are these characters? Why do I care? Oh, they said something, they're talking about girls, and that's not stereotypical at all. Totally won me over. And I think it's because of complementary contrasts. Now, I really want to talk about this movie in the deep dive discussion. I want to get into spoilers, and I want to especially talk about the ending, not just the climactic ending, but the very ending. So I would really recommend that you watch this. I would recommend this movie to anybody that comes across my path. And when you do watch it and you want to explore it further, I welcome you to watch the deep dive discussion video of RotD's review of Summer of '84. In the meantime, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.